weeks here in Luke chapter 16. Last week, we looked at Luke 15, and if you weren't here because of worship in the woods or other reasons, we went through those three well-known parables in Luke 15, which is really one parable with three sub-parables or 3 points to it. And it was a time that Jesus was confronting the Pharisees for their lost sympathy towards publicans and sinners whom Jesus was eating with. They were all upset with Jesus for eating with these, spiritual lowlifes in their minds. And so Jesus told the story about a lost sheep. He told the story about lost silver. And then he told the story about a lost son, all to rebuke them for their lack of rejoicing with God over the potential repentance of one sinner, these people who Jesus was eating with. And that lengthy parable for the Pharisees came on the heels of two other parables directed at them while he was eating with them. So he had kind of worked over the Pharisees pretty good with these parables. We get to Luke 16, and Jesus gives them a brief break from the coded rebukes. But I see here at the end of the story that he still is hinting to them, or they're picking up on it. But this parable is unique. You can see in verse number 1, it says in verse 1, and he said also unto his disciples. So he's not directly addressing those Pharisees, his enemies. He's addressing those friends of his, the followers. Now, when the Bible speaks of disciples, it doesn't always speak of the 12 disciples. Jesus had many disciples. In fact, we see at one point he's sending out 70 of them 2 by 2. We know he's got the 12, but anyone who followed Jesus, who was willing to take up their cross, forsake all, and follow him, those were individuals whom Jesus called his disciples. So this group of people he's addressing could be large, it could be small, but we know he's not addressing the Pharisees. And that's, I think, interesting for us as we proceed, because this is one of, if not the most mysterious parables that I've read. Maybe you've had a handle on it. Maybe you've read this before, and it to you has made a lot of sense. But for much of my life, I've read it, and I've had more questions than I've had answers. It definitely is clouded in mystery. There are question marks about what he was saying to me for many years. And we're limited because there's no context. We don't know exactly where Jesus was. We don't know what he was doing. We don't know what the disciples were doing. We don't know anything about the setting. That usually is a good piece of evidence for us to figure out where Jesus is coming from. We know nothing. We only know he had just sat down to eat with the Pharisees. He grilled them, left them, went and ate with the publicans and sinners. The Pharisees murmured. He then grilled them. And all we know is that he said also unto his disciples here in verse number 1. So join me as we enter into this mysterious cloud. Let's try to see what God has for us this morning. Verse number 1, Luke chapter 16, and he said also unto his disciples, there was a certain rich man which had a steward. Now, a steward is a manager. We don't use that word now. If you were hired by someone who owned property to manage their property, you wouldn't be a steward. You would be a property manager. But biblically, we're talking about a manager here of a home, an estate, a business. And Jesus tells us in the second part of the verse that the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods. So somebody told the boss, hey, do you know your manager's stealing from you? Do you know your manager's embezzling? So the boss has to address this obvious violation. Verse 2, and he called him and said unto him, how is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. So he's about to get the firing here from the boss. And the steward says within himself, verse 3, what shall I do? For my Lord taketh away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig to beg I am ashamed. We don't know why he can't dig. He says he can't dig. And that's a reference to I can't go out and get a job with the highway department. I can't go out and get a job with the local landscaper. I cannot dig. So either he was, in his mind, too old to do that. Maybe he had a physical limitation. Maybe he was just a wuss. Maybe he was a white-collar guy who, couldn't get calluses. We don't know. He just says, I cannot dig, and to beg, I am ashamed. So I'm not going to go get a job digging ditches, and I'm not going to go beg on the streets for money. I got to do something. I'm out of a job. Verse number 4. I am resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. That they is going to be defined by the next verse, but we know he has a plan, and it has to do with his employer's borrowers or customers. Verse 5. So he called every one of his Lord's debtors unto him, and said unto the first, How much owest thou unto my Lord? And the customer says, 100 measures of oil. And he said unto him, Take thy bill, and sit down quickly, and write 50. So he gives him a 50% discount. Interesting. Verse number 7. Then said he to another, And how much owest thou? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said unto him, Take thy bill and write 80. So he gave this individual a 20% discount. Here's where it gets interesting for me. Verse 8, and the Lord, that's his boss, his former employer, and the Lord commended the unjust steward because he had done wisely. And then Jesus adds on to that this statement, For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. Let's stop and recap, because if you're like me, you're just, whoa, what just happened? Jesus is teaching a parable to his disciples. He's obviously trying to communicate something good to them. He tells a story about a manager who's embezzling from his boss. His boss finds out, fires him, but before the guy gets officially fired, he has a plan to go out and give discounts to his customers. And then when he does that, the boss says, well done, to the guy he just fired. And then Jesus, at the end of that, says, yeah, the children of this generation, meaning the world of unbelievers around us, they're wiser than the children of light. They're wiser than the people who seem to be in the right place spiritually. And to me, I've always read that and think, how is that so? How is this a good thing? How is this unjust steward wise? Why is he to be commended? Why is Jesus rebuking the children of light? A lot of mystery for me. But fortunately, Jesus is not done teaching. So let's read on in verse number 9. And maybe this will help you understand what Jesus was teaching in the parable. Verse 9, and I say unto you, speaking to the disciples, Jesus says, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when ye fail, they may receive you into everlasting habitations. Now, you must know I started reading my Bible as a young lad. I grew up in a Christian home, grew up in this church, and so I was gifted with good parents and a good church and a great pastor to teach us to read the Word of God. So I started doing that when I was younger, and I came across, I remember, mammon. Like, how did a dinosaur get into the Bible? How is a woolly mammoth at all? That's what I was thinking. How is a woolly mammoth a part of unrighteousness? Well, the word mammon is nothing you and I use today. It comes from the classical Latin mamona or mammona, and that simply means wealth. So when you replace the word mammon with wealth, Jesus is telling his disciples to make to themselves friends of the wealth of unrighteousness. That should clear up everything, right? That's really easy to understand. Why would Jesus say we're to make friends with the wealth of unrighteousness? I don't understand, Jesus. Well, let's keep going. Verse number 10. He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. Well, the word unjust has to go back to the parable because we're talking about an unjust steward. Verse 11. If therefore ye have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon or wealth, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if ye have been faithful in that which is another man's, who shall give you that which is your own? Parable context for sure. Verse 13, I think this is the summary. No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. You cannot serve God and wealth. Now, so many of our parables have dealt directly with the Jewish leadership. If you've been with us on this long journey of digging into the spiritual riddles of Jesus, you know now that they are not just flowery stories for children to learn a simple truth. You now know they are deeply, deeply doctrinal. The Jewish leadership who rejected Jesus were often given these spiritual codes to figure out what he was saying. And Jesus was often telling them these really deep doctrinal, historical, prophetical things that they needed to discern, and they often didn't. And so we approach the parables now with, okay, what is he telling the Jewish people? What is he referring to by telling us about a steward, an embezzler, now a guy who gives discounts, and we're told to make friends? What's going on? For once, this is not a deeply doctrinal parable. Just because Jesus often did that doesn't mean he always did that. But I think who he's speaking to gives us the greatest understanding of that. He's speaking to his disciples. So he's going to give his disciples something different he often gave the Pharisees. And this is nothing more than a practical teaching lesson. He's going to give them some really practical counsel that he knows they need. Now, why is he doing it in this clouded, mysterious story that has questionable ethics to it? Why did he choose that story to teach what he's about to teach? Very simple, because he's got his listeners thinking. Just like you now are like, yeah, what does it mean? What is he saying? You're curious, and you're hoping to learn what he means. Now Jesus has your mind, he has your attention, and most likely will have your memory, and it will be able to give you a lesson that will last much more than just Jesus saying, hey, go make some friends. That's easily forgotten. That's easily overlooked. This story will bring some meaning now. So what was Jesus teaching his first century followers? What is Jesus teaching his 21st century followers today? What does Jesus want you to learn? What does Jesus want me to learn? Number one, they're all very practical, but they're very important. Number one, survive failure by securing friends. Look again with me at verse number 9. These are very, very important but practical lessons for you to learn. So learn them today, please. Number one, survive failure by securing some friends. Verse 9, Jesus says these words, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when ye fail, they may receive you into everlasting habitations. Very, very mysterious statement, but that goes right back to verse 4. Look at what the unjust steward said in verse 4. He said, I am resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So by Jesus saying, go make some friends of the wealth of unrighteousness, that when ye fail, those people will receive you into everlasting habitations, or we might say houses. That's what the steward was doing. He said, I just got fired. I've got to make myself friends who will receive me into their houses. This guy was going out and essentially promoting himself to get hired by the customers of his former boss. That's what he was doing. He was trying to make friends to get hired, because he said, I cannot dig, and to beg I am ashamed. And so his plan, this unjust steward, was to offer discounts to the people that he was collecting from in order to make friends with them. And his boss said, well done. His boss, who fired him for being an embezzler, recognized the wisdom in this man not fighting the firing, not going to the labor department and saying to them that my boss is firing me unjustly, and I'm trying to build the case to defend himself or to deny his problems. He wasn't out whining about not having a job, complaining about not having a job. He said, I need a job. I messed up at this job. I got to get another job, and I've got to appeal to people that they might trust me, that I might be able to manage their household, so I'm going to give them a discount and make them think that I might be a good candidate to take good care of them. This man was trying to secure friends, and he was trying to do that to survive his failure. Now, that may sound a little fishy to you, but Jesus said now, the children of this generation, the people who do what the unjust steward did, they're wiser than the children of light. That tells me that something was happening in Jesus' day that Jesus didn't like. And that tells me that the children of light, let's call them the followers of Jesus. Let's call them the moral majority. Let's call them the people that were following the law of God. That tells me that they were isolating themselves. That tells me that they were avoiding people who didn't look and sound just like them. That tells me that the children of light were saying, we can do this all on our own. We're going to separate ourselves from all the unbelievers, from all the world, from all the publicans, from all the sinners, all the people who have wealth but are immoral. We're not going to have anything to do with them. And Jesus is saying, that's not smart. That's not smart at all. Because you're going to fail in life. Jesus said, make friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when ye fail, not if. Jesus says you're going to fail. Everybody fails in life at some point. Everybody makes mistakes at some point. And when you fail, you need to have friends that you can turn to. Well, the spiritualist in the room says, I don't turn to people, I turn to God. Right? That's, I turn to God to help me. Well, who do you think God uses to help you? Now, God can just drop money down from the sky. He can drop down health from the sky. He has that ability, but He almost never does that. If you pray for healing, He usually sends you a doctor. If you pray for a financial assistance, He usually sends you a job. You see, God uses people to bless us, to help us in our failure. But when we isolate ourselves from everybody, when we stick our noses up at all the world and say, we are holier than thou, we cannot associate with you, we can't be friends with you, we are limiting God's network of support for us. And we are saying to everyone else, I got this, I don't need you, I'm better than you. And Jesus says, that's not wise. The Bible pushes the fact that we need people. In fact, failure is the example of why we need people. Solomon said, two are better than one. Solomon said, for if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him that is alone when he faileth, or when he falleth. There's nothing isolated or secluded about the Christian life. There's nothing about the Christian life that Jesus teaches us to get on our horse and do it alone, by ourselves, without people. No, He picked 12 when He came. And then He picked 70. They sent them out 2 by 2. Jesus is always bringing people together. He's always building teams. He's always connecting people. Jesus calls us sheep, which means we flock together. There is strength in numbers. We need each other. We need people in our lives. We're not to see people, whether they're believers or unbelievers, as enemies. We're not to see them as off limits. We should make friends with everybody we can. Not a single amen, TC. Where were you? I usually count on you. You're sleeping too? I'll say that one more time. And the reason you didn't say amen, because that doesn't sound right. We're not supposed to be friends with unbelievers. We're not supposed to be friends with evil people. Well, then take it up with Jesus, who is saying to make friends of the mammon of unrighteousness. That's what He said. I wouldn't say that unless He said that, and that's what He said. We should make friends with our neighbors. Yeah, but you don't know my neighbors. I don't need to. You should make friends with, well, why? Because they're your neighbors. Like, you want your neighbor to be your enemy? Why would you do that? You have to live next to them. I have a neighbor who's a very nice guy, very easy to like. He knows I'm heading out of town. Now, I have an acre of property, and that may not seem a lot to you who live in the country, but for us suburban people, that's a lot. And when your riding lawnmower dies and you have to push the whole thing with a 21-inch push mower, let me tell you, 5 hours of pushing a lawn like that is not fun. So my mower died. I'm heading out of town. I did it Friday night. I felt good about myself. And my neighbor says, Kev, you want me to mow your lawn for you? Well, I looked at him. Now, I'm a man. And just so you know, men don't let men help us. So like, I got it. I'll cut it from California. I'll be fine. You know, I had to humble myself and say, you know, that'd be great. Now, I'm also very particular, so I worry, is he going to, knock things down? Is he going to cut it wrong? I have a guy who offered to mow my lawn for me who lives next door. Doesn't come to church here. Doesn't have the same belief system I have. But I'm friendly with him. And so when I fail or when I'm in need, guess who God uses to help me? My neighbor. We should make friends with our neighbors. We should make friends with our community members. We should make friends with our police. One of the reasons we didn't have a problem, can you mute this, guys? Jesus wants us to make friends with mechanics. He wants us to make friends with politicians. Oh, you're going to have to compromise to do that, and there'll be a bad influence on you. Aren't we supposed to be an influence on them? Yeah. One of the things I love about our missionaries who are with us, having been down to Trinidad and watched how they operate, Brother Barkowski is maybe you've noticed, he's very personal. Has he said hi to you before? Has he walked around and introduced himself? He's that way throughout the entire community. So when he's doing functions, I'll say, well, where are you getting that food? Or how are you getting that stuff? He's like, well, this guy's going to help me out, and this guy's going to help me out. These are people who are in the community, not coming to his church. He's making friends with them, not to take from them. He's just being friendly, and God uses that to funnel supplies and opportunities into the ministry. Jesus said, you can't do it on your own. This is not a flying solo type of life. People need people. It's wise to be friendly, knowing we're going to need help at some point for some reason. I teach young people this every opportunity I get. I tell them you're going to need people in your life. You cannot escape that fact. And if you avoid people, you will live not only a lonely life, but you will have no help in life. So no one, including Christians, can get through life on their own or only through the help of other believers. It just doesn't work that way. Number two, I'd encourage you, based on this parable, to secure friends by showing faithfulness. Maybe you've noticed in our world that friends just don't come easy. We live in a cynical world. We live in a world where people are assuming you're out to get them. People assume you're out to take something from them. And so it's hard to make friends. And yet this parable teaches us how to do that. The unjust steward gave some discounts to his former employer's debtors to show them just a little favor. That's all he was doing. There are exceptions to what I'm about to say. I understand that. But by and large, what we are on a small scale is generally what we are on a large scale. If you're lazy with the small things, you're lazy with the big things. If you're diligent with the small things, you're diligent with the big things. If you'll stop and help a stranger, you'll stop and help a friend. So generally, what we are on a small scale is indeed what we are on a large scale. And that first impression, the first impression people make on you or you on them, yes, there are definitely exceptions. There are definitely the smoke and mirrors. But in general, we are who we are. And that first impression is pretty accurate to who we will be. This unjust steward gave discounts to show these customers that he could be great managers for them. Because look at what Jesus says in verse 10. Again, it's slightly cryptic, and it could be perceived from different angles, but Jesus says in verse 10, he that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much, and he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. Meaning, if you're faithful in little, you'll be faithful in a lot. If you're unjust in a little, you'll be unjust in a lot. This steward, this manager, he most likely was taking off the top very early in his employment, and that unjust in a little led to being unjust in a lot, and that's why he was caught. Verse 11, if therefore ye have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if ye have not been faithful in that which is another man's, who shall give you that which is your own's? You see, the unjust steward was trying to reverse his reputation. He was trying to change his life. I do believe this was a moment of repentance coming on the back of Luke 15, but he's trying to show these new potential employers that I can be very friendly to you. I can be very favorable to you. And he's trying to get them to believe that he would be a good manager. And don't look too far into what he was versus what he was going to be. Just understand that Jesus is teaching outside of those specific truths, that what we are on a small scale is what we are on a big scale, and what we are on a small scale is what helps us make friends. Because that's how the guy was trying to make friends, by doing a little favor for them. And if you want to make friends, and you should, because failure's coming and you need friends to get you through failure, you've got to focus on faithfulness, meaning being faithful to the small things. Jesus wants his disciples to know, don't take your character for granted when it comes to making friends. Your character is the most important part of making friends. You don't secure friends in this life by not taking the small things or the finer details seriously. No one makes friends by being hard and harsh, by being untrustworthy, by squeezing them for every penny, by being unfair, or by seeing people as potential piggy banks. No one is going to commit the true riches to you if you can't manage the world's riches. No one's going to give you their heart if you can't handle their fortune. No one's going to give you their friendship if you can't handle their finances. Faithfulness is how you earn friends. And it's faithfulness in the small things. It really is. Listen, if you can't smile faithfully to people, you'll never earn a friend. That sounds super artificial, but that's the reality. If you can't shake somebody's hand faithfully, give them attention faithfully, consistently, don't expect to have friends. Solomon said, he that hath friends must show himself friendly. Oh, well, I'm a very nice person. I'm a very friendly person. How do they know that? Are you showing that? Well, but I am on the inside. I love everyone. If you don't show it, girl, nobody's going to ask you to be their friend. So it's about the small things. Here's a simple one. If you can't ask someone how they are doing faithfully, they'll never entrust you with the true riches of their soul. If you can't show up for the simple things in life faithfully, if you can't overlook a mistake faithfully, you'll just never have any friends. Well, that's fine. I don't need them. Then you're missing the point of the parable. Because when ye fail, you need someone to receive you into everlasting habitations. Number one, survive failure by securing friends. Number two, secure friends by showing faithfulness. And number three, and most importantly, you show faithfulness to make friends, to endure failure by serving the Father. This is ultimately what Jesus wanted his disciples to see. Why did the unjust steward lose his job? What is at the heart of the unjust steward's mistake, his failure? Greed, right? He got greedy. He said, I can skim a little bit off the top, take a little bit off the top. Ooh, I can take a lot off the top. The boss still doesn't know. I can cook the books. I can figure out how to get more money for me. Greed set in. And that greed led to his failure. And that's why he learned to adjust himself in the job pursuit. You see, most likely during the day and age in which Jesus is writing, stewards weren't given a salary. They weren't given a wage. They were given a proportion of their work. They were given commission. So you read this and say, well, the guy just gave the owner's customer a 50% discount. So that means the owner lost 50% of that bill, and he's commending the unjust steward. And you're thinking that doesn't seem right. Well, most likely, the steward is taking the bill from the boss and tacking on 50% to get his commission. So when he goes to this guy, he says, what's your bill? I know. We'll drop that 50%. The boss is still getting his money. Who's losing their money? The manager. 20%. Why is it a different number? Because he probably knew he could only do 20%. This was probably a guy. This was probably a woman. You know, it's like the mechanic thing. The mechanic said, oh, you need a fifth wheel. And the lady who doesn't know cars buys into it. But that's what probably is happening here. And so he says, I'll give you a 20% discount. The boss gets his money and says, oh, you gave up your money. You gave up your commission on those two. Well done. You're trying to get a job. You're trying to show them favor because they don't know that he's given up his commission. They think he's just being favorable. But what's happening with the steward doing that? He's giving up his greed. He knows now in his failure, I need friends to help me, and I won't make friends if I'm greedy. And so not to be greedy, I will be faithful. I will be favorable. I will be helpful. Verse 13, this is the theme of the parable. No servant can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. Now, yes, this is a lot to do with money because the Pharisees in just a few moments who are covetous, they'll get angry with Jesus for saying these things. But this is less about money and more about character. Jesus is using money to show that when you don't serve God and instead serve money, you're forfeiting your character. Because you cannot do both. You cannot serve God and have a good character. You cannot be holy and serve God if you are following money, if you are serving money, if you're serving ambition, if you're serving anything that is about fulfilling yourself, pleasure, you name it. Whatever you want, if you follow that, you cannot follow God. And if you follow God, you cannot follow that. You can't do both. So you've got to choose to serve God, and in serving God, you have character, which produces faithfulness in the small things, which helps you be faithful in the big things, which gets you friends so that when you fail, because you're human, you've got friends now to receive you into everlasting habitations. The whole point of the story is, don't pursue wealth. Don't pursue things of this world that you want. Pursue God, because that brings you character, and character attracts friends, and friends will be there in the time of need. Money is the biggest threat to people and to our relationships in this world. It really is. Money tears people away before it brings anyone together. Money can't buy you love, despite the song. Money can't buy you friends. In fact, I've not seen any data on this, but I'm certain and feel very confident in saying if someone were to calculate social success with wealth, you would find the wealthiest in this world are typically the loneliest in this world. We hear story after story, two big ones just in the past few years. The wealthiest people rarely have marriages that work. The wealthiest people can buy a lot of popularity. They can buy a lot of interest. They cannot buy friendship. They cannot buy companionship. Why is that? Because money ruins us. The love of it is the root of all evil. You want good friends in this world? Look for people who walk with God. You want friends that will last, friends that will be there in time of need? Find somebody who walks with God, someone who serves God. They're the ones who will not serve money. They're the ones who will not let money get in between a friendship. They're the ones who will have character, and they'll be faithful in the small things and the big things, and they'll be there for you when you need them. But this is about us. We need to make friends, and we need to make friends by being faithful in the small things. And we be faithful in the small things by serving the Father. This is the mysterious parable of the unjust steward. No deep doctrines or prophecies to unveil today, but very important lessons that all of us must take and implement in our lives. Make some friends. I remember my father at one point said to me, Kev, he says, if you get a couple of friends in life, you're lucky. And I thought to myself, Dad, my father was a very friendly man, incredibly friendly, a man of tremendous character, a man who was the social butterfly of every party, room, meeting he was at. And my father said to me with tears in his eyes, Kev, if you get a couple of friends in life, you're blessed. I thought this guy would have oodles and oodles of people he considered deep friends who would be there for him in a time of need. But when he said that to me, I realized friends are really hard to find. They don't come easy. But when you find them, they're worth all the money in the world. Jesus said, make friends, careful now, of the mammon of unrighteousness. He says, make them everywhere and anywhere you can, because you'll need them. Oh, I got to compromise to do that, right? No. Be faithful. Have character. People want those people. People want those people. Christians should make the best friends in the world. Shouldn't we? Shouldn't everybody want our friendship? Shouldn't everybody see us as safe? Shouldn't everybody see us as loving? Shouldn't everybody see us as gracious? Shouldn't everybody see us as trustworthy? Shouldn't everybody see us as faithful? Shouldn't the children of light be the most attractive people in the world? That's what Jesus is saying. And the best way to win someone to Christ, I'm all about whatever way, but you know the best way to do it? The best way to win someone to Christ? Befriend them. Befriend them. Now they're listening to what you say because they know you care about them. So make some friends, both in the church, out of the church, but start with serving the Father, and everything else will come into play. Let's stand and have a word of prayer.